Now, I'm not gonna lie, I honestly totally forgot that I even bought the thermal sequence 2, and I was pleasantly surprised when I saw a notification email pop up while I was casually browsing. And some of you might think that I'm joking when I said 2 whole years, but believe it or not, it's downright true. Now, I'm not really going to bore you guys with the whole building process with regards to the thermal, but I'll go through some quick specs and highlights on what makes this board special. Firstly, it's the design. It's pretty iconic by now, instantly recognizable even with just a glance. When I first saw it, I fell in love with it, and that was pretty much why I instantly bought it during the group buy. I chose to go with the Kuro colorway and decided to grab an additional plate in the same colorway as well. Back then, I already knew how I wanted to build the thermal, and you probably already saw shots of it. If you're in the custom keyboard community, you probably also know of all the shenanigans that happened within Rama Works, which was further worsened by the impact of the pandemic on the world. Major factories were shut down, production lines were stopped, and shipping via freight or air were neither here nor there. The promise of months turned to a year, and then another year went by, and finally, Thermal Sequence 2 shipped. There was even a point in time at the very last moment where customers might not even get a wheelbar PCB, but that's a story for another day. Regardless of whatever has happened, I honestly still looked forward to having the thermal in my hands, and to be very frank, I wasn't disappointed at all. Thermal is one good looking board, and with this having the HHKB layout, it's one of the more unique boards that I now currently own. So, as mentioned, I went with the Kuro colorway as well as the Kuro aluminum plate. To complement that, I went with 8008 ink switches. These are basically the same as Gateron ink blacks, but instead they have an opaque housing with Gateron yellow springs and are in the 8008 colorway. My personal lube of choice for linears is Tribosys 3204, so that's what I used here. Personally, I just find that Krytox 205G0 is a little too thick for my liking, and with the way I lube, it tends to dampen the characteristics of a switch just a tad too much. As for the springs, I simply used Krytox 105G0 oil and did a classic back lube method. For the stabilizers, I went with Staebies Revision 2. There's something special about Staebies that I really like, even more so than TX stabs. But this only applies to the black nylon version. The clear polycarbonate version is not the same, and I personally wouldn't recommend that. For the stabs, I simply use a generous amount of Krytox 205G0, and here's one tip I have for those of you who don't have a syringe, like me. If you need to do the butt plug method, simply take a good amount of lube on your brush and insert that into the stem hole before you lube the sides of the stem itself and insert it into the step clip. When you do the wire, simply use a generous amount again, and once you have them all assembled, there should be more than enough lube within that space to eliminate any form of rattle. With that said, still do test your steps before moving further from this point forward. Perfect them at this point in time, because if not, you'll regret it. From here on, assembling the thermal is pretty straightforward. Rama Works has a really good visual guide online, and if you follow that, you will not mess up anything. With 8008 inks, it would be a crime not to use GMK 8008, so we have the second revision, GMK 8008-2 in both the original colorway as well as the blue. We are gonna use both of them. Now, for all of you who are new to the hobby, GMK is expensive, no doubt about that, so you are free to use whichever keycap set you prefer. To finish up the look, we do have the accompanying Rama Artisan for both sets as well. And there it is, finally, after 2 whole years, I have built the keyboard I envisioned right from the day I added thermal to the cart. So, was it worth it? Well, before I answer that, let's take a listen. Personally, I'm really pleased with it. I'm still kind of getting used to 8008 inks because I generally prefer a heavier typing experience, but it's good to have something unique once in a while. I'm also pleasantly surprised at how much flex there is with the thermal despite having installed all 6 of the standoffs. If you are a fan of more flex, you can choose to not install those standoffs, but I would say that having them installed provides a more even flex, which leads to a better overall typing experience. But all in all, was it worth the 2 years wait? Honestly, I would say yes. The Thermal Sequence 2 is going to stay in my keyboard inventory. But if you're asking me if I were to enter yet another group buy by Rama Works, well, I will probably give that a pass.